students, for our English project, our team will be analyzing and presenting the short story of The Lottery, which was written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1948. As an introduction, I will present to you the biography of the author. So we know that Shirley Jackson was born in 1916 in San Francisco, California. She was brought up with a younger brother in one of the city's most affluent suburbs. Her parents were conservative and country club people, and they regarded their child with some perplexity. Jackson identified herself early on as an outsider, but also as a writer. And the fact that she identified herself like this outsider person was probably related to the fact that Jackson's mother verbally abused her, and she consequently grew up with a low self-esteem and a fragile sense of identity. Now, diving a bit more into the academic aspect of her life, we know that she began writing when she was a teenager, but she focused on it seriously when she was in high school and in college. In 1940, she graduated from the Syracuse University, where she had studied English, and she had published stories in the school literary journal, and she even began her own literary journal that was called The Spectre, with a classmate that was named Stanley Edgar Heyman. They married in the face of opposition from both of their parents, and this was shortly after graduating, and then they moved to New York. There they both contributed to the New Yorker. She was contributing as a fiction writer, whilst her husband was a staff writer. Jackson published her first short story in 1941 that it was called My Life with R.H. Macy and the New Republic. From then on, she published stories frequently in word-regarded magazines and literary journals. By doing this, she had to divide her time between raising her children and writing. And this was because in 1941 they settled in Vermont, and because her husband had been offered a post on the literary faculty at Bennington College, and there in a crude house in North Bennington we raised 4 children. In fact, she was a devoted mother, but she was also devoted to her writing. So her parenting style was more haphazard than commonly accepted at the time. So, yes, Jackson did not fit easily into North Bennington at all, and the town would likely serve as a inspiration for the New England town that was depicted in The Lottery. So after she published The Lottery, a rumor began that she had actually been stoned by children of the town, and she was also frequently rumored to be a witch and a psychic because of her interest in black magic and witchcraft. But Jackson died from a heart attack in 1965 while she was taking a nap. She was only 48, and the last words in her journal suggest a woman that was heroically trying to persuade herself into optimism. As she wrote, "I am the captain of my own fate. Laughter is possible, laughter is possible, laughter is possible." Now, I would like to present the actual setting of the story, The Lottery. Regarding time location, we do not get a specific year, but we do know that the story starts on June 27, and that the process of the lottery starts at 10 a.m. in a day where the weather is described as calm, pleasant, and warm. And for space location, we know that this takes place on a small village of around 300 people. We know that it's a small village because it is said that the process of the lottery that involves the entire community takes less than 2 hours, whereas in some surrounding villages that are clearly bigger, they take over 2 days. Another fact that we know about this village is that it is a farming community. Why? Well, it is constantly alluded to harvest and crops, and this is why, in fact, the lottery takes place, because it is said to ensure a good harvest.
Now I will explain characters and plot summary. For this section, I decided to divide the characters into certain groups. These characters will share similar characteristics. And well, let's start. The first group is composed by 3 members: Mr. Summers, Mr. Joe Summers, Mr. Harry Graves, and Old Man Warren. Mr. Joe Summers is the host of the annual lottery. He's described as a round-faced, jovial man, and who is in charge of the coal industry. For further information, he had no children, and the villagers depicted his wife as hostile, thus they felt sorry for him. Mr. Harry Graves is the postmaster and the assistant of Mr. Joe Summers, Mr. Summers during this event, and Old Man Warren is the oldest man in town, and well, he's in favor of continuing this tradition, as he describes those who don't as fools. The next group is the Hutchinsons. The Hutchinsons, they are the family that gets chosen, and well, this family is composed by 5 family members. Bill, the head of the family, Tessie, his wife, and well, she's the winner of this lottery, and the 3 kids, Bill Jr., Nancy, and Dave. Well, it's also worth mentioning that they had another child. She's Eva, but well, she's no longer part of the family as she married Don. Finally, we have the group of the families. The first family is the Dunbars, composed by Clyde, Janie, and Horace, the child. Then, Clyde is the only villager that didn't assist to the event, since he had broken his leg, and as a result, his wife, Janie, had to participate for him and take his place. That's all for the characters. Now let's start with the summary. So, what happened? First of all, let's establish the setting. The characters unfold inside a small town of around 300 people. And every year at the end of June, the 26th or 27th, they follow this tradition. And it seems that it has been around for a long, long time. The process consists in gathering all the people into one place for establishing the beginning of the ritual. So as the name formulates, it follows the same procedure as the lottery. The one member of the family, the head of the family, or the man, will receive a slip of paper, and will get chosen at random. Then that family needs to be assembled in the front, and they have to repeat the same method. Then the one with the marked paper will be the victim that gets stoned to literally get stoned to death. So, the Hutchinsons. The Hutchinsons is the lucky family that gets chosen. So, they assemble in a line, but Tessie, the Bill's wife, gets chosen. The paper has that she has a mark. So well, Tessie Hutchinson, in an effort to defend her husband from getting called by Mr. Summers and for her own sake as well, she starts yelling and crying like it isn't right or it isn't fair. However, in the end of the text, we know that she gets killed by the villagers, by all her neighbors, and the kids, even the kids, like throw rocks and stones at her. Well, the purpose of the ritual is never directly stated in the text, but yet it can be concluded that it maintains, like following this tradition, maintains a certain stability inside the village. And well, through certain actions of the characters, we notice that they are clearly invested and devoted into following this tradition. For example, with Old Man Warren, we have, in this text we have dialogue, so we get to know a little more about what he thinks. And we also know that they aren't the only village that practice this, that has this ritual, since she says that there are certain other villages that decided not to practice it anymore, I guess because, well, it's murdering and, well, it's not that moral. So, but then Old Man Warren starts like complaining about how the youth, it's like really they are like cowards and they don't respect traditions anymore. So, well, we know that he is completely in favor of following this tradition. Also, well, the neighborhood, we know that they are in favor since they don't show any sign of hesitation when killing people. I mean, maybe they're like really friends between them, but if like something needs to be done, they will kill with no hesitation. And even his husband, Tessie's husband, hurries her into accepting her violent destiny. So yeah, I mean, in brief, that's what happens in the story.
Okay, I will start with the section of the tone. The tone of the story is very objective and calm. However, this tone, it's not consistent. The tone changes as the story unfolds. At the beginning of the story, the tone is bright and gentle. Jackson, the author of the story, accomplished this through the use of imagery. She creates a pleasant setting by describing the day as a clear and sunny day of summer. But as the story continues, there is some fear that is perceived from the villagers as they become quiet while Mr. Summers starts to read the names of the families. There are some words inside the story that build up a sense of nervous anticipation in the reader, such as nervously, awkwardly, or she held her breath. And finally, at the end of the story, with the statement, a stone hit her on the side of the head, the tone completely shifts from one that it was normal and calm to one of horror. By creating this gentle and playful tone, Jackson lulls the reader into a sense of security. However, we know at the end that this security is false. It was a distraction to the reader, and it was created with the purpose to emphasize the cruelty and violence of the lottery that is revealed at the end of the story. Okay, now I will talk about the style of the story. In general, Shirley Jackson's writing style is very fluid and easy to read. She doesn't use graphic or gory or terrifying descriptions, but instead she leaves the readers to interpret and imagine on their own. The writing style in the lottery is very clinical and journalistic. This last element can be found in the initial paragraphs, where the date and how many people participate in the lottery are being described. If we discuss how the story is narrated, we can notice that the lottery is very much plot-driven rather than being the common character-driven stories. This means that the author puts more emphasis in elements that makes the story continue rather than sharing characters' backgrounds or stories. Finally, I'm gonna explain about the symbols that are inside the story. The lottery expresses the author's feelings concerning traditional rituals throughout the story. This short story has a detailed explanation about the process of selecting a person that is going to be sacrificed. This process is known by the townspeople as the lottery. I found 5 elements and symbols that are inside the story, which are the stones, households, black box, three-legged stool, and the lottery. I'm gonna start with the stones. This object represents the town's devotion to ancient rites and traditions. The townspeople include children by allowing them to gather the stones. If we analyze this, it can be said that this has the purpose of guarantee that the tradition is going to be passed to the next generations. In the case of the households, the story contains households that have a traditional patriarchal family unit with the father at the head. This symbolizes authority and hierarchy in the town. The next symbol is the black box. The black box is the main idea of the story. Its black color symbolizes death. If we consider this, it can be said that the box is a concrete representation of the tradition and rituals associated with sacrifice. It is also related with the logical loyalty that the villagers has to this object and the traditions. The next symbol is the three-legged stool. The three-legged stool has 2 meanings because of the number. The first is the Christian concept of Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The box, and therefore the lottery itself, rests upon the Christian concept of religion. There is another possibility, and that is that this doesn't have to be the Christian Trinity at all, and that the use of the three-legged stool might serve to underline more generally the ritualistic significance of the lottery. And talking about the lottery, that it's our last symbol, the lottery represents any action, behavior, or idea passed down from one generation to another and that is accepted without questions, no matter how illogical, cruel, or violent it is. In this story, the lottery has been taking place in the community for as long as anyone can remember. It is a tradition that no one has thought to question, and it has also a saying that is lottery in June, corn be heavy soon, that can be related to sacrifices if we consider the ending of the story and how the winner is the one that dies.
I am now going to begin explaining the themes that I was able to find in the story, starting by the first category, which is of people's place in society. I will be mentioning the themes of this category in no particular order, as well as respective theses. The first theme of this category is that of gender division or gender roles. Now, for this one, I have 2 theses. The first one is that women are seen as generally weaker or inferior to men. And the second one is that it is men who are supposed to be the head of their households. The next theme in this category is that of family and family structure. First, the thesis for the part of the family is that people's identities and reputations are determined by the family that they belong to. And the second thesis is related to family structure, and it is related also to gender roles, is that each person holds a specific role in their household. This is, I believe, very highlighted throughout the whole story, especially in the fact that people are always grouped by their families and their family names. Equality is the next theme, and I believe this is one of the most important ones in the story. It is very evident, I believe, especially in the fact that the ritual which the villagers hold in this story is a lottery when it could have been any other type of ritual. The thesis that corresponds to this theme is that rules apply to everyone no matter their age, gender, or their social status or position. The next category, which is related to tradition and superstition, is one of the most important categories and holds some of the most important themes and theses. The first theme is that of the dangers of superstition. I believe that more than anything, this story highlights the dangers that come with being highly superstitious and also the negative aspects that come along with it. The thesis that I assigned to it is that being very superstitious can be damaging. Then the next theme that I believe is very important in the story is that of the importance of traditions. The thesis that I assigned to it is that old habits die hard, but I modified it a little bit so it's old traditions die hard. It shows or it represents how it is very difficult for people to allow change in regards to their traditions, which are very deeply ingrained into their society and their culture. The constant development and improvement of society. This is shown in how other villages in the story are beginning to change their traditions, and even in how in the very same village that the story takes place, changes are happening gradually and slowly. So the thesis is that the society is always or is constantly improving. And the final theme in this section is the conflict between the youth and the elderly. I believe that this theme is a parallel to a more important or a more relevant theme, which would be that of the conflict between progress and traditions. The next category that I divided my themes and theses into is that of human nature. And the first theme is that of sacrifice. The thesis that I assigned to it is that sometimes individual sacrifices must be made for the greater good. We see this in how Tessie is sacrificed for the sake of the rest of her town. The next one is that of the violent or ruthless nature of humanity. We see this in how people of the village are willing to kill one of their own who did nothing wrong, at least as far as we know from the story, just because it will be a benefit for the rest of them. And finally, egoism is the last theme of this category, and the thesis that I assigned to it is that when push comes to shove, humans will turn against each other. Finally, I have two other themes, which are that of time, which is constantly mentioned in the story, and finally of luck. And then I also have another thesis that was not assigned a theme, and it is that family is there for the thick and not for the thin. We see this in how Tess's family turns against her especially towards the end when her kid is given a stone and he's going to participate in the stoning of her own mother. Then we also have another thesis, which is it is very easy to get singled out by society. We see this in how just by picking a paper, which has a black dot, Tessie is singled out by her society. That will be it for the themes and the thesis of this story.
So now I'll talk about how social organization was presented in this story. This topic, social organization, is considered to have a great relationship within the story, since when speaking of individuals belonging to a community and that they have a sufficiently old tradition, it speaks a lot about how communities behave socially in general. For this section, emphasis will be given to issues such as the individual roles of each community member and the rules or regulations that must be followed in the ritual known as the lottery. The type of society presented in this story seems to have a quite marked social statuses. Men are the heads of the families, since they have a job, while women seem to be housewives. Children go to school, and older siblings seems to have certain responsibilities. A role that every individual must accept is their participation in the lottery. In this case, it is the men who most pick up the papers that will decide their luck. If there is not a man who is not in the legal age, the wife will receive it, such as the Dunbar family case. Once the head of the family is chosen, each member of that family must participate in a mini lottery. The chosen one will be stoned to death, as it was the case of Miss Tessie Hutchinson. Therefore, it is known that this community has certain common social hierarchies for the year that it was published, 1948. However, that individual social role from which no one is saved of participation is the lottery. Now I will talk a bit about the issue of identities and their relationship to this story. In this theme, identities, there is the concept of lifestyles. In this story, the community seems to lead a fairly common lifestyle for what any small American town could be. Without redounding to what is stated in the previous topic, which was social organization, now I will only limit myself to say that everyone has obligations in their daily life. Within the lifestyle of these people, we find a ritual that must be performed once a year, and that cannot be missed: the lottery. This ritual is undoubtedly a characteristic feature of the identity of these people. Within the theme of identities, there is also the concept of beliefs and values. Although everyone in the town has a quite similar way of thinking, I believe that the individual who acts as a model is the old man Warner, who considers inadmissible that other people from different towns are losing the ritual of the lottery. This individual has lived 77 lotteries, which warns us of a great historical context. This is important since I believe that this is the factor which gives the validation to the beliefs and values of these people. It gives a certain legitimacy to their actions in the ritual.
Now we're going to connect this story with philosophy, in particular with philosophy of Nietzsche's book, Genealogy of Morals. This book is separated in 3 essays. The first essay, he talks about good, bad, and evil. And the second essay, he talks about guilt. The third and final essay, he talks about ascetic ideals, which is a type of beliefs. But in this analysis, we're going to focus on the first essay, like I say, good, evil, and bad. Nietzsche grabs these words and with genealogy, which is like archaeology, tracks the beginning of the use, like for when they started to be used and by who. And he reaches something very interesting, which is that these words started to be used first by masters, by rich people, by masters who had slaves that made the work for them. And with this, he finds that good first didn't have any moral intention. It just meant like strong, and bad didn't mean any moral thing also. It meant, like in German, the word is schlecht, which means plain. So for the masters of slaves, the good were them, because they were strong, they had money, they were healthy, and their emotions, their happiness, for them that was good. But the slaves were something plain, were something unhealthy, were poor. I mean, they were slaves, they were of a lower class. So for the masters, that was bad. And that was the use of words for masters. And with time, Nietzsche talks about another type of morality, which morality that we just talked about is the master's morality. But there is a dichotomy here where he talks about the slave's morality, because for the slaves, they didn't saw themselves as bad, they saw themselves as something good, like their own feelings were something good, because the masters were the ones that were bad, because they were evil, because they were like forcing them to work, forcing them to be like that state, unhealthy, plain. And here's the dichotomy: masters morality, which good is masters and bad was the slaves, and the slaves morality were the masters were evil and they were good. So here's where we're going to make the connection with the story. So we have this village with these people and this ritual that has been done for many years, and for them this ritual is something good, is something that needs to be done. It needs to be done so the village can be strong. So strong equals good, even if it ends on lynching a person. For them it is needed. And well, here we see the master's morality. We see like their own beliefs are something good, and the lack of these beliefs or feelings is something bad. And like old man Werner says, when he hears that other villages have already quit lotteries, he says, I quote, "Pack of young fools." And here we can see clearly the master's morality. And well, this is the morality for all the village, for all the people, including Tessie. She arrives late, she acts like it doesn't matter, like this is something that can be forgotten. But then, when her husband is elected and she realizes that her life is in danger, she becomes sort of a slave. And quickly, her morality changes. She starts saying that this is not fair, it was a mistake, and this morality then is aggravated when finally she is elected as the one that's going to be lynched. And with the end of the story, she says, it isn't fair, it isn't right. And that word, right, that tells us about her perception. She now sees the lottery as something bad, as something not right. The people that are throwing rocks at her, she saw them as something evil, and the lack of lottery, she saw that as something good. Her morality is now one of the slaves. What should we extract from here? Well, it's like Genealogy of Moral, the book of Nietzsche. Nietzsche does not want us to choose a side, rather question our morality and realize that other moralities are not necessarily bad, but just out of the picture. We need to understand that these moralities are something in movement that can change with the status, creativity, and more. Well, we reached the end of our analysis. of the Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and we have learned that humans are not necessarily good, are not necessarily bad, but rather they are just humans.